Okay, so I'm gonna do something slightly different this time. I'm gonna talk over this video as we watch it. Right, so I'm starting here with the reverse lounge. It was a bit windy in Kandersteg that day. That worked reasonably well. There on the right side you can see the top of the cable car from which you have to hike up to the starting point. If you do that 4 times a day, it can get a bit exhausting on a hot day like this. Alright, so I'm flying out, and basically the plan was to go over these trees onto the left side of the starting point. I already got a bit of lift after the takeoff because of the soaring. Right, so I'm flying over the trees, and by the way, if there is a lot of valley wind, those trees can cause lee side rotors at the starting point, so it's always good to kind of take off far enough from them. But once you are high enough, it's okay. So I'm flying over the trees, and I get to this not super steep slope, so basically the sun has a chance to hit it properly, and you have all these rocks and some trees. So that stuff is supposed to warm up and send bubbles of hot air rising, and then you kind of ride those bubbles and go up. So that was the basic plan, you know. Of course, with that come turbulences, so I was bracing for being thrown around, but actually I wasn't. So as we can see, I'm kind of going straight and I'm not getting any lift. Basically I crossed the whole rocky area, didn't get the lift I expected, so I'm turning back. Now we can see the cliffs much better. I think I wanted to get a bit closer. So the thing is that on this side the valley wind is not really hitting the cliff, and so you can't get any soaring, and it's also not steep enough for that. And the thermals weren't working, so basically there was nothing to keep me up there. And yeah, down there in the valley is the landing spot that I didn't want to visit anytime soon. So basically my plan B was get away from this side and head straight for the opposite side of the cable car, which I'll have to fly over in a second, and get to that big cliff in front to try and get some soaring going. So soaring is when the valley wind, the wind coming up the valley, hits the cliff and then turns vertical, turns up, and then you kind of when you are close to the cliff, you can use that upwind to stay up. You can see the waterfall on the cliff kind of in the middle right now. There is a cool hiking trail, like a via ferrata, going up that face near that waterfall with bridges and stuff. It's pretty cool. Alright, so we can see the wires of the cable car in the bottom right corner. I'm flying over it. I actually managed to get some lift over the cliff already, so going up. And yeah, so this is where most of the soaring happens in Kandersteg. Right in front of this big wall, or then further on. Right between these two features there is this kind of a depression in the rock face where you don't want to really fly into that because it can get turbulent inside. So here you can see me being pretty conservative, keeping my distance from the face. Actually there weren't too many gliders around this time of the day. I think I was pretty late, so yeah, I had a very free way to get where I wanted. And here I'm getting a bit closer to the mountain, just to take advantage of the rising air. And so what I wanted to do now is get some altitude before doing the next step of what I had planned. So you can see me flying pretty close to these trees. I felt the air being pretty smooth on this side, and almost no turbulence, so I felt pretty good about flying close to the terrain. Here we have a view back into the valley. and yeah, we see some gliders up there above the highest rock, where I think basically you can get the highest off the bottom of the valley. But on previous flights I had some luck getting good lift on this side, so that's what I'm trying to do. Actually, it was pretty cool. I saw an eagle on this side flying next to me. I hope it shows on the video. It was pretty big bird just kind of soaring next to me for a couple of turns, and there was a smaller bird attacking it all the time, but it was so much faster that the eagle just had to take it, couldn't really do anything. Yeah, so I'm just basically flying back and forth over this edge of the mountain. It kind of turns behind the corner here, behind this little patch of wood. It turns around, kind of turns to the right, and so flying much further that way would bring me into the lee side for the valley wind, so I didn't want that. So just kind of staying here at the edge and going back and forth and kind of gaining little bits of altitude. But this was one of my first kind of longer flights, so I had to work with what I got. Yeah, opposite there you can just about see a little lake between the mountains. Every time I kind of turn you can take a peek there. I think that's called the Osinarsee. It's actually possible to fly over there from this location, and that must be pretty amazing. So that's definitely one of my plans for the future. Yeah, there you can see it just between the mountains. Alright, so yeah, I'm pretty much flying back and forth. I'm trying not to hit the trees. I'm trying not to hit other gliders, even though I had all the space basically. I'm staying on like 10-20% brake, and as I was getting sort of above the edge of the cliff here, every time I was going this way, I could feel a bit of a turbulence just above the edge basically, because you can get sort of behind the edge once you are over it, and that's not where the lift is the strongest I found. So I was just trying to be above the cliff still, like don't get behind the cliff. Here I actually gained a little bit of altitude, I think. Could see more of that grass above the trees. And then it gets harder to keep going, because what really lifts you up is the air rising along the cliff, right? So once you get behind here, you might get some thermals from the trees, but that's not really the strongest factor here. So I think I'll do like a couple more turns back and forth, but it wouldn't. Yeah, maybe that's the bird. There was a bird on the top of the screen. It was kind of flying above and below me at different points. So yeah. Basically, you can see the pattern I'm using to turn is like a figure of 8. I'm never doing a full circle, if you can notice that. That's just because it's kind of hard to judge the amount of space you need for a circle, and if you don't want to end up in the mountain miscalculating, you just always turn away from it basically, doing this kind of figure 8 and never really heading into the mountain. And that's the eagle down there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I wish you could see it for more than a second, because I saw it around me all the time. By the way, this is a new location, new mount for the camera I'm trying. I actually have it on my shoe, so that's why I don't see any bits of me basically, because it's just sticking in front of my shoe, which makes it a bit weird on the takeoff. And there was my shadow, and that's a bird sort of down there, and you could catch a glimpse of the little bird attacking it if you're watching this at 4K. yeah, that I had a little bit of presence of mind to bend the leg down to show you a bit more from the cliff. Yeah, so the changes of angle are basically me bending my knee, right? So yeah, so I think the camera mount works reasonably well if I have to walk around a lot to fix the glider before the takeoff. It's a bit awkward, but otherwise, yeah, I think in terms of not seeing, and that's the bird again, and that's the small bird. Yeah, I mean, it gives me the best view in terms of not having any part of my body in the view, which I like, even though it kind of looks like a stream from a drone, so I'll have to think about that. But yeah, you can see a couple gliders actually got onto my side of the mountain now, and so I'm like watching with doubly attention before I turn. I really don't want to sort of running into someone on a glider. It's bad news, so you really want to try not to have that happen, especially this close to the terrain. You can't really pull a reserve in time if you hit someone and get tangled. Yeah, so as you can see, I'm still pretty much at the same altitude. Actually might be getting a bit lower now. I think I got too far from the mountain. I can't quite see, but there might be some folks above me. So I wasn't taking the optimal route anymore, perhaps. Yeah, but at least it will give us a bit of a view from the face of the rock face if I get a bit lower. Basically my plan was to head over to the other side of the valley, and actually it wasn't really a plan, it was kind of a spontaneous decision for which I apologized to my instructor, who I haven't informed about this as I was flying over, and because lots of people in the school have the same glider, it gets really tricky to tell people apart. But anyway, at some point basically I decided to just disconnect from this mountain and fly over to the other side, because I saw people flying there, so I was like, well, this seems possible physically, so let's go check it out. But before I get there, I'm gonna scratch along this rock a couple more times, I think. Yeah, by the way, the cable car in this place is really cool. It's super small. It takes 8 people, and it can get super cramped with all the paragliding backpacks and stuff. And it's really one of the old school ones that you can find in Switzerland, which is, it's definitely not like a big commercial operation. You see the guy, like the same guy sells the tickets and then opens the cabin and does everything, so it's pretty cool. Alright, I think on the little grassy patch to the right I was actually able to get some thermals as well, not just soaring. So every time I made it a bit further over there, I got some reward. But I didn't want to get too close to the bend of the mountain to not risk getting on the lee side. Okay, now we can see that I lost quite a bit of the altitude. I'm kind of starting to be a level with the edge of the cliff, and there is the kind of crevice in the face where you shouldn't go into because of turbulence. And let's see, is this the moment that I decided to go for it? Because I'm pretty far. Okay, not yet. I think I was avoiding. I didn't turn for a while because of some other glider. By the way, one more thing I wanna go into. I actually have fear of heights, and every time I'm climbing, I'm shit scared. And somehow this doesn't trigger that much when I'm flying. So, while I would really have problems doing the Via Ferrata and climbing that wall, or just, you know, rock climbing it, I really don't have that much of a problem flying along it like this. So if you guys have a fear of heights while being on a man-made structure or a building or anything like that, do try flying, because it can just be a more pleasant experience. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I still love to climb, but there is always that little bit of fear in my head. And when I'm flying, it's it's much easier to enjoy for me. Alright, so I think I went for it, and I decided to fly over to the beginning of the mountain on the other side of the valley. Now, as I mentioned, we have valley wind going on, which is a wind going up the valley, which means that I'm pretty much flying against the wind right now. I'm at the top of the, you know, loading range for the wing, so, you know, I can penetrate against the wind pretty well, even without using the speed bar, which I didn't want to, because I didn't want to lose any altitude. But maybe that's something to consider, because the wind was like 15 k's or 10 k's. Yes, so I'm not sure, maybe it's actually worthwhile to use the speed bar in that situation. Okay, so, you know, when I was going to this mountain, I had to calculate, you know, do I have enough altitude to make it back to the landing, which is pretty much under the rock face we were just soaring against. And so, you know, it's like always in the back of your head, can you make it to the landing? Even though, you know, to be honest, you see that the whole valley floor has, you know, abundant opportunities for landing anywhere in those fields. The farmers wouldn't be happy. They're actually pretty pissed if you land in a field that's not supposed to be stepped on, but, you know, there are limits to how much you want to obey the Swiss rules. Okay, so yeah, so basically this little thing in front of me, I had two options. I could get, you know, around it and try to soar on the front side of it, where the cliff is, where the valley wind is hitting it, which is where most of the people were. I would say 80% of the gliders I saw on this mountain that day were, you know, soaring against the front of it. Or you could try and catch thermals on the trees to the right. And that's what I kind of was going for on this and other flights as well that day, but it wasn't really working for me. And then actually the instructor told me that it's a pretty dumb idea to be kind of on top of these trees, because you are effectively in the lee side of that cliff. So the air rising from the cliff creates a rotor as soon as the mountain sort of flattens off on top of the cliff. So you really don't want to be in there, because you can get washed down and can get ugly. So what I should have done is fly around and get sort of in front and go back and forth along that cliff, which we can't see, but it's around the corner. Yeah, so I think at this point I decided that I'm starting to be a bit too low, which was actually total overreaction, because I forgot that I'm gonna be flying with the valley wind on the way back to the landing, which you can see now. There is a glider sort of above it doing circles. So I'm flying with the valley wind, and that's actually super easy to get to the landing with this altitude. So I could have stayed there a bit longer and maybe try to get in front of that cliff, but anyway, I decided to play it safe and then come back. Okay, so now basically we get into landing, and yeah, one more thing, I should sort of practice figures for the license exam, but when you come to the landing with this kind of altitude, you don't have enough room to you know, really practice. So maybe I could do a couple circles or 1 or 2 figures of 8, but not you know, a lot of practice. So when I got here, I think I do like reasonably comfortable. You know, I get to the on top of the building, which in German is called the Abbaraum, I think. Is basically a spot where you want to lose any remaining altitude, and that's also the place where your landing pattern will start. So it's like a designated spot. Depending on the direction you want to land in, you have the spot on which you shed the remaining altitude. And as you can see, I decided not to really stick to that plan, but I decided to fly over this little river here and then start coming back. And the instructor was a bit pissed because you're supposed to not do this because maybe you don't make it back if there is enough wind pushing against you. Note the power lines on the left, you don't want to be flying into those, but you have to fly along them to align properly with the landing. So I'm gonna, this is sort of my landing pattern over here. I'm gonna go over this little farm and turn, and you can see a couple people already landed over there. And I'm just gonna aim for a circle, but I'll do one more S-turn about the parking lot. All eyes on me. Actually, we had a guy crashing into a car this day. And then on the ground you can see a circle from blue flags that mark the designated landing area. 30 meters across. You're supposed to practice being able to hit the target like this. And now I'm pumping the brakes to kill any glide that I might have and land into the circle, which I'm able to do most of the flights now. Alright, so it was a little example of a flight in Kandersteg. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.